Now, Geshe Lamrim Bahatangi, Kurve Dunga Geshe Thubten Rabten Kimbe, Govan to be Chidoja Lamyam Jedi, Anzuki, Simgu Tonen, Jig, Dui Tonen, Semi Tonen Yamlen Chehores. Then Yamlen Jeva in Zada, Yamlen Chevala, some of Dana Dinitis Dangores, down to some Tonen, then Yamlen Che said it, the Kurve Dunga Tadale Geshe, Tabio Toku Same, that Yamatu Dambo, Yanji. 가서 깨워치만 있냐야 대 영문적 거부터 된del이야 네 저기 람냠네 잠니제 저 유스만 냠는 제투역에 된 켜봐진 토고도 선비 디토역에 돈달라 맞아 개 디바마 샤야다 개어투비야 제 냠네 제 직디와 다되니 이런 직진에 되는 디 아니 데려 고마다 고유 동화 타달을 줘야지 아니 탈비고 뭐 토고도 디 토비기 치도 군에 군론 디군에 라제 탈비고 토비치도 되네 저기 예지게 지말로 소파도 추좀 파신 것을 지지소 쭉 진행된 제야 되네긴 대안 고위 동화 타바즈미 지금은 진짜 심지어 탐지게 나라는 뭐 산유고보 토고도 디 산유고보 모토는 심지게 된 개천보 시부지 제투사 말 된자 심지어 탐지게 된 개천보 주 심지어 탐지에 산예서 고발라 근데 산유고보 토고도 디 인자다 산유고보 토비치도 근데 토발라 잠니제 곰장주심 곰장주심이 군야네 파신주게 냠는 제제 다 산유고보 토비야디 탑람디 다림버 숨디 나저 기보 총원 튕별라 미림바다 징겔라 미림바 기보 침별라 미림바 세디 디샤도 여러와 아디나리 당한테 기보 충별 미림바디 그생다 냠는 제야라 다 조딩한테 가르고 왔네 기보 침망 원dio 고방 토고도 원dio 된 아니 된 될야 아니 잠니제 장주심 람냠네 차상 제투에 된 개발진의 개와 침만 마톱는데 탑민도 선배게다 니 돈이기 둔바디 계제 뭐 개와 침만 돈이 디 돈달라 냠는 제야데 고고르와 디네자다 개와 침만 돈이로 개발라 당보 삼로 간스 당고를 해야 돼 가자 그생 다 소수게 삼다 치와미다 와 삼당고레스 제상기디치 남 치와게 바레 남지에 메레스 안도시 치위에서는 최마도 관계에 판도 요 말에서 삼당에도 내가 저기 최지하게 삼목공원 리기를 맞으셔야 가지고 세 디가야 삼되는 치와치마 삼나게 되니 리두고 말에서 디 야야게 된다라 가지고 그 생각 그러시오 바르스네 치와게 바 남지에 메 네 치위에서 최마도 관계에 판도 요 말에서 디시네 다 치위에 메 봐도 디게 생각도 쉬사발다.
Good evening. We're looking at the various stages of training to embark in order to achieve enlightenment. So what this refers to, this expression, stages of training, it refers to training our mind, or to express that slightly differently, developing our way of thinking. Through developing our way of thinking or training our mind is this process of cultivating paths, mental paths, that will eventually lead to enlightenment. To cultivate these paths, one has to train one's mind in a specific graduated sequence. Hence, we are looking at the Lamrim, the graduated sequence of stages of training that lead to enlightenment. To generate, so we're in this context. One has an eventual goal to generate a determination, a genuine determination, to become a Buddha for the sake of all beings, so that to generate the mind of the Mahayana within. But to be able to generate genuine bodhicitta within, to become an actual bodhisattva, one has to develop compassion for all beings. And before one is able to develop compassion for all beings, one first has to develop compassion in relation to oneself, self-compassion. This refers to, or what compassion refers to, whether to in relation to oneself or all others, is the wish for beings to be freed of suffering and its causes. So to give rise to such a wish in relation to others, one first has to have this wish for oneself. Because how can one have the wish for others to be freed of suffering whilst oneself continues to suffer? In order to give rise to a wish to be free of suffering, one has to understand suffering well and its causes. It's only through understanding suffering well does one give rise to determination to gain freedom from suffering. Because we have some understanding of suffering and its causes, and we want to be free of those. But we need to deepen that understanding and see just how expansive suffering is in all its subtle aspects, and therefore come to really recognize the causes that lead to all these expressions of suffering. So therefore, in order to become a bodhisattva, one first needs to give rise to this determination for oneself to gain freedom from the suffering realms of samsara, which comes about with this generation of self-compassion or definite emergence, comes about through the recognition of suffering. So to be able to come to recognize suffering, one first starts with a suffering that's most explicit, the coarsest levels, before one moves down to the subtler levels. But to be able to think in this way, to focus on a single topic of the Dharma, one's mind needs to be uplifted from its general troubles and concerns that currently overwhelm us, our general troubles and concerns that have been dominating our mind throughout this life. In other words, one needs to lift one's gaze from the attainment of this life's pleasures and the overcoming of this life's problems and look for a greater goal. So to develop such a wide and expansive mind is a mind that is focused on lives beyond this one. That then is the focus of a practitioner of initial capacity. That is the foundation that is required for the mind to be focused enough to be able to engage in this analysis of suffering and its causes at a far deeper level, and that way give rise to the determination to gain freedom from suffering of samsara in its entirety, the training of the being of intermediate capacity. And that is the indispensable prerequisite to give rise to the training of a being of supreme capacity. So this is the presentation of the graduated stages of training one's mind to cultivate the mental paths to enlightenment. So where we are is looking right at the start of our training, which is recognizing initially this precious human rebirth, this great capacity we hold. It's a strong, powerful, positive realization that we have attained this remarkable jewel with so much potential. Then the second part of that reflection then is to realize that what we have that is so incredibly valuable is impermanent. It's not going to last. This is the fundamental, the basis of this realization of the impermanence of this precious human rebirth is the gateway into the Dharma, the foundation of the Dharma. It is the most important mind for us to develop in order to finally have a mind that is not overwhelmed by this life's problems and complaints, a mind that is striving or distracted by this life's pleasures. If we reflect sufficiently well on this foundational training of impermanence, we will then have a focus beyond this life. That means our mind is focused enough to go deeper, no longer distracted. Hence, we have now looked quite far. We're nearing the end on the presentation on the impermanence of this life. Of the three routes, we completed last week looking at the second and the associated reasonings for each of those routes, the 6 of the 9. And then that brings us tonight to the third route.
Date18 October 통화나 디체 닌남시 제신 동화 아니 체베 타고양 지양 치사메스 아니 이도 온웨 너기 풍보 진예지 예장 뉴천 잠양 켜르메스 메데스 달렌지 기베 셰르장 도나 젠다지모스
turning to the text. So in the handout, the e-book, we're at the top of page 101, and in the published book, in the middle of page 88. So what in our translation is presented as one large paragraph. It's actually three separate sub-outlines. So looking at the first outline, which is the actual reasons. When you see that you must go to another life, although you may be surrounded by very loving and distressed friends or relatives at that time, you cannot take even one of them with you. Whatever happens, whatever heaps of marvelous riches you have gained, you cannot take along even a tiny particle of them. Indeed, if you have to leave behind even the flesh and bones you are born with, what need to talk of anything else?
다디네 디시오레 데더 지지 데더 세도에다 먼저 녀려야 아니 지지 치와 녀바 남칭에메 삼다이도 다다도 신앙아저 시위 김전디게 되네 치위긴 멍부여바다 지 녀만에 지기네 다리버도 마시바를 하바지야 메바 메레 시원 차사시 나 지게 기부 제 심제이나네 미나 dun로이네 하이네 다 기네 시바를 마도 디마게와제 기제 시와제 자기네 하도요 말세 되네기 샤메비 김전 삼다야 되네기 치위기 김전 망보도 선데 치와 녀바를 샤세 타줘야 안 남치 다 기지시기에서는 시와를 녀바요 말에 시위기 망보도 기네 기디 태수나 시야레스는 두시나 삼다도 치와 남치 녀바 메바서 삼다 세상 데다르스를 되네기 삼다다 하고요도 다다 치와네 타 최샤다 시월 녀바레샤스 베게 되네기 삼다요도 하고요도 지진 파로도 조 거버 통하나 시다 지산 체디 류디 도르체다 시네 아니 개와 치마질로 조고바디 하고용으로 되는지네 아니 하고 수수기 다 삼나다도 제바치디 오다 텐데 레샤스 베게다 시월 직도에게 시고바다 타쳐버려샤 선배 삼 디기요도다 지된 파르시면 통화세 디시고다 통화나 로아 통화나 통화세디다 개와 치행해봐 타쳐버 레도와 선배다 마시와 가면 치열을 타야 균입니다 치왕해봐 레샤세 베다 난 남치 치왕해봐 또 남치 녜매 통화나 하고요 되다 통화나세고다
very first word in the Tibetan here, it's not translated, it would be thus. So thus then is the link to what we have looked at before, but it's made clear in what follows in the rest of the sentence, hence the translator omitted it. When you see that you must go to another life. This then is a link to the two roots that we have already looked at. Now we're at the start of the third, which is thus refers to when one has truly come to recognize that death is certain for me. In the same way that each and every other ordinary being, whether human or animal or unseen being, have all died, whether they were a spiritual practitioner such as myself, or someone with no interest or capacity in the spiritual path, or whether they were a greatly developed spiritual practitioner. All have died. And when their death came, just like when mine comes, there will be no medicine that can extend my lifespan indefinitely, nor meditational practice that can extend it definitely. When death comes, and it will for me too. Moreover, when that my time of death will come, this is completely uncertain in our world. The time of death is completely unknown. There is no certainty in terms of my age, because all too often, as I know, the young do die before the old. In fact, even the healthy may die before the ill. This happens. There is no certainty when my life will end. So this is what we have come to see. That when you see, reading from the text, when you see that you must go to another life, this recognition, those first two prior roots have been well cultivated.
똑바 통화세 침배 똑바로 침배 통화 두신의 제바제 두신다 치와 인비 김제 두시 삼다 남징이면 두 삼다 두섬 어디 된된지 시에 타 쳐버리던 남징이가 짜와기는 민도와 선배게다 되니 시에 타 쳐버려도 선배 또요 똑바나 똑바 통화나서 되니게 침배 예반예제 침배 통화도 침배 또요도 똑바레스 되니 또요도 다 가르삼 당거래서는 대원마 뒤셔야 되래 통화나서 침배 또 써야 되고 그래.
The way that we should relate to this word see is, obviously it doesn't refer to see with your eyes, but it refers to an intellectual understanding. So it refers to a conceptual understanding. But moreover, we shouldn't relate to this word see as merely being an understanding, but rather give it a stronger understanding of being a realization. So to say as an aside, like the path of seeing, it's the same word to see, but that is a path of realization. So the word see can carry this meaning to realize. And that is the meaning here. When you see or when you realize, what it refers to is you have this conceptual understanding that is of such transformative impact, hence it should be understood as a realization, that you carry it around with you. It influences you at all time. That this time I have, this opportunity I have, is finite. And how much is left is completely unknown. Therefore, I have to use it well. That is what we have seen or realized, and that influences us. We carry that realization around with us.
되네게 당해봐 두치는 체맹 통일도 하고 거기도 다 되네 안 삼는 가르당 거라서네 제사다 안다 시령해봐 이나 시로도 다 가르 시위 값서 가리 판도도 가리 판도 가리 판도도 또 오면도 제바 제치고 그래 되네사다 디체 년남 시 자시 가서 년남 시 제신 동화 체외 타고르야 지경 치사메 시대 다 되네게 다 시용 시위 값을야 소설이야 넘기는 저게 대위링이야 소수의 예도당 본자당 파마다라서 예 아니 자신이 시에세도 소설 배 전부 tum보다 랑게 개위신 이거로 자시 랑게 쪽보다 되네 개위신이라서 봐 되네게 소설에 배 지금 넘기는 전부 쇼유된 제도 유견 되네게 망고 쇼지 소설이라 타고르지 되게나야 다디나네 지 시디가블라 소소직부 줘야마도 딕차 되네게 로봇 같이 연나 차선 찍견 치세요 말 티야면 와스 제가 티네 줘야면 와스 제가 되네자 당연한 저게 체대라 맛이 빠라들이야 소수의 분야래 소수의 조보래 소소 거부래 소수의 파마래 아니 되네 소수의 부구래 세다 되네 소수의다 기회신 알로든 칭에서 되네게 빼지 약보를 쉬어를 때 이나 대소 시리갑라 대소 찍이야 치줘서요 말해서 제가 되네 인삼 티야 치세요 말해서 제가 언도신다 되네게다 시위갑라 대소 티야 두에 민도 삼다에도 되네 티안 치스미야 봐도 하고도 그래서 우리가 치세요 말해서.
So first, just staying with this first part of the sentence, when you see that you must go to another life. So having this realization within, so the meaning of this word see here, one will naturally then turn towards this question. What has value then? I recognize that my opportunity in this life is rapidly drawing to an end, and it may end any time. So what has value? And then the sentence continues. Although you may be surrounded by loving and distressed friends or relatives at that time, you cannot take even one of them with you. So this is the first of the three reasons. So each of the roots have three reasons. This is the first point that one looks at. And these three reasons refer to what in general people value the most. And the first refers to friends and relatives. Now what won't come across in the English, but these two terms, which are correctly translated as friends and relatives, in another context is the friends in virtuous friend, what I always translate as spiritual teacher. So you'll know the term virtuous friend. So what's the word translated as friend there is actually a word that also means friends and relatives. So therefore, those that we are closest to, that whose relationships we value the most, such as our spiritual teachers, our loving relatives, our cherished friends, all of them. These relationships that we've spent so much time, so much energy cultivating over the course of our life, when the time comes, we cannot take even one of them with us. In other words, when the time comes to leave this body behind, we also leave behind all our dear friends, our cherished relatives, and our spiritual teachers as well.
Denegeda nyendigi dusine nyenda denegi roboti suina dene chi sami no sembe do chebe cheba chine chi su meba de chi meba chi jo meba de ha ko wache ha ko dene ya yumjen jidile ya da ana nyendigi chi mena sosogi 균을 잘라디게 케 여러베세네 두쌈담바이나다 이동의 너르기 풍부 진예지 예장 진예 예장 두센자면 켜도메스 제가 소소야 안베지게 규절라 자침보다 지게 뉴바침보 가레시 여베이나야 야고시우치 여베이나야다 제절라 야가레 두하레 데네 막고 여러와다 진짜 이동의 소소의 야고 거부 소소이 될래 잘라 되어봐 소소 판도 침부 유되게 되는게 잘라간데 쉬어봐 있는 유나양 충주 두센자면 기도면 전부도 케야 파수죠 충주지 두텐는데 충주지 않게 말해서 기도요 말해서 두진다 되는게 케야 두에 민도 쉐바지도 근데 두센자면 케야 민도 와서 두진다 삼당을 해서는.
So when our inevitable death does come, our friends, our relatives, our spiritual teachers, these people whom we have relied on so, who have helped us, been there for us throughout our life, these relationships that we've invested time and energy into cultivating, when the time of our death comes, they cannot offer us any protection or even meaningful comfort. We will be entirely alone, and we'll leave this life alone. But not only can our dear friends and cherished relatives not help us at the time of death, and the text then continues, whatever heaps of marvelous riches you have gained, you cannot take along even a tiny particle of them. See, this refers to all the wealth and possessions that we've spent so much of our life accruing, and all our treasure, sentimental treasures. All of these, they also get left behind, and we leave this life alone with nothing.
Anda denege keme, da denege ane ninyu du cheme, ane gyujala dige keme na, da ane ya anzuge je anzug lü na ne su keyer bese orada lenji gibi şerü kyang dorna asa. Cezada anzuge lenji gibi şerü side anzuge ami Tsongkhapa ngadu shune kema tabane ngazu gidi ne anji nyamdo keduge ngazu lüdi de ngazu sheru lüdi da lüdi truptu sheruli shada rugoda denegetil truptu lüdi is orada de ane ngazu gi kebane sonde mashi badu ane kedu kapde nyamdo yedi baita gidi ne mashi badu nyamdo yeyo bashi chagore was tenji kebi sheru se nyamdo yeyo bache 다디 난즈 기디네 자침보슈 쟁아즈 다보자와데 소수수나 소수 류디다 자치슈 제제 다보겐 여고르바 데네기 류디 당아즈기 케여르베스네 디안 케여마 도르나서 디네 디안 케메 메바제 아니 산 조고레스 오다
Just like the situation with our relationships with others, our wealth and our possessions that we have sacrificed so much over the course of our life to gather and accrue, at the time when we are at our most vulnerable, at our most in need, they are of no benefit. They also get left behind. And then Lama Tsongkhapa takes us to the third reason. Indeed, if you have to leave behind even the flesh and bones you were born with, what need to talk of anything else? So this body, in its various guises, from the moment of conception to this point that we've reached at now, the very end of this life. This body has accompanied us. It's changed phenomenally, but it's always been there in some guise. We've worried about it, we've nourished it, we've tried to look after it, we've beautified it, given it attention and care. But now, the time has come when it can no longer support us, and it too will get left behind, and we'll have to leave alone.
Da dinang benenga juge ni do da disiki gang she da and wo da ma rangi nor chala da dina de anda nga ju lenji ki bi lu se de da nga ju za chi sho de nga ju lu de za chi sho ji go ba da nga ge di ne je se da nga du chin na sam da bin da so su ge da gyu chala ro de jin de ji ge ba lue da tu ya ji gung go ba an shi ge ang ni do da zhuo bo la so ba do pa mai ne so su ge ka bi lue da tu go ba so lui le tu yon de andine le ta tu go mara so ge lui di song gyu che ya so lui le ne gyu ba na ane pa ma le tu bu je ane ji ge xian ni shi so zhuo wei ne tu bu je la so ba de ran ge lui song gyu chi do ande lui le ne gyu na ane ji ge xian cha san pa tu bu je tu ya da ga tu ya ge dan da la ji ga song gyu lui song gyu ji go ba je da nga ju lui de za xie shuo ji ne 제가 당하는 저기 지칼라사에 되게 양주 류송급 제도 두로고야 되게 류송급 제도 면주지에 되게 류송급 제도 되네기 제가 당하는 저기 내가 카레 레베나 체디기 된다 내가 레는 조아주 류기 송급 시도 제디가 로브라 짱짱 도와다 근데 칼라차상 아주 내가 레 칼라요 된다 지고로 두로 된다 지고로 면주이 된다 지디로 디 된다 지고로 나디 아직 파조 캠병들의 류리 기우야 지도 보러 어디 되네기 제가 되네서 류디 자치쇼 되레데 이나 디안히아요 말와서 그러다 되는 두신의 심주체네 디선 기회 매바 던 산 조고도 와서 비 두신의 삼다에서 그러
The Lama Tsongkhapa presents three reasons here, which are in general what we tend to value the most. But of these three, it's really our body that we value the most. Because if we take the first of the three, that of our friends and relatives, so even dear friends, if we have a big falling out, we may well cut off relationships with this person, even though we've been close for many years. And in fact, it's all too common that children even may distance themselves from their parents because the relationship has soured. And then, if that's the case with family, then certainly in terms of our material possessions, even what perhaps for us has the greatest sentimental value, if we are in need, we'll dispose of that. But this body we will always take care of. We will nourish it, we'll try to eat healthily, try to exercise sufficiently, ornament it, trying to look at least presentable at the very least, always trying to take care of this body. So of the three, this is the one we value the most.
Denidu chine jeba che du da du song zu du sin jeba che sam da ya cha gro da che na de de nyam len je se du sin sam no na lo ya a de ne ke sa ra sa re be de ne du ye de ne min sin a du chine jeba che du an gan sam je li ya du jeba che du ka bla da de so shi du ka bla ka ya ke sa me ba je sha sha zhuo go ba de tong go re je tong ge ha go re se me nge ba ji nie ba ji yong go re shi re.
As I've just presented there, this is what you should be doing with all these topics. Because this is an illustration of practice, because practice means thinking about the topic, thinking about it based on what is presented in the teachings and then through your own lived experience. This is the meaning of practice, or literally, to gain experience of. So to gain experience of the Dharma means contemplating it to the point where you come to see its truth, see its validity. And this word see can carry the meaning of to realize the truth or the validity of the teaching. And to realize something means that you carry that meaning with you. In other words, it has an ongoing influence on your way of thinking. That is how one has realized a topic. So here, you are being encouraged to look at these three, recognizing the value that you've placed in them, the energy you've placed in them. But at the time when you need the support of others most, at the time you are most vulnerable, they can't but desert you.
Andi denegi shidu kala kan kya meba de je yagus do de ne denegi kya yeba ina nyora shim shu la de bene kaji shiru chidi drobo de do de me shi de ben de shi go nga yim do la ro shi de kala drobo da ni de ge tia yeba ina denegi so shiru chidi so go ni ba chasa ang nga yim do la ro 나 거기서 줘야 되바 맨날 줘고 했으니 요라는 거와 데 내 티줘야 가시게 니 간송을 끼어도 간송을 끼어도 결혼서 줘고서 내가 갈래 녀도에 죽으면서는 요라는 거와 데 티에메 바데 야고로 다 규제라데 이케려 여번에 zemle 날이야 미 규천시고 되게라 땅에서 미망고 규천시고를 된 거고 봐 데네 규신되게 데네게 시도도 규제라 차상 chen 제도 වෙන්නේ 데네 안줄 비즈다메로 강가 못해요 제가 디네 인자 디네 기체 여베네데 티야당 예니도 되게 티야 여베나 강아몽부티야 규절라되게 제려 여베나 디네 마시엔 두캔절이야 네 교고 차제 강아몽부티에게 니가 유다되게 메베데 오르도아 디네 수부디에 게 여베네 아직 수부 하케 있는데 아직 데리지야다 시오가 데리지라 겐다야다 겐드리자다 키리데 갑라 야고시고 위에서 되네기 전에 강아 먹고 수여시 차야래도 하던데 강아 싫어 뉴욕으로 해도 하던마
And also with especially the first two of these three, at the time of one's death, one can have quite a lot of inner conflict as well as outer conflict about these. So, for example, when someone that's very close to you dies, they may well have the wish to accompany the dying person. Despite knowing it's not possible, they would want to go with their dear friend or their loved one, if only they could accompany them on their onward journey with whatever difficulties. In other words, it will cause so much pain that this cannot happen. And likewise, the person lying there weak and vulnerable, alone, and quite possibly afraid, would desperately want to have a dear loved one accompany them, hold them close, keep them warm. But they cannot. And this leads to distress. Distress for the person leaving, distress for those being left behind. But perhaps even more obviously is in terms of wealth and the distress that can cause. The dying person can have distress for many reasons. Distress about leaving what they've spent their life gathering and hoarding together and being very proud about and boasting about, and also those items of great sentimental value. This can cause them distress. What can also cause them distress is if in their process of treatment before their death, they consumed a lot of what would otherwise be the children's inheritance. This could cause them distress. And it certainly can lead to distress for the children, having seen their inheritance used in this way. Likewise, when the person's leaving this world, they may be a little bit more honest about the relations between their relatives, knowing that there will be conflict now that they are leaving, conflicts over money. So this happens all too often. This is not what we spent our life focused on. We didn't put time and energy into building our relationships with others and building our wealth so that at the end of our life, when we are in greatest need, what we had valued so ends up increasing our distress. But this all too often happens.
데네 인자다도 지나 삼다다 시디고를 대소 강한 캐면 다 시디는 가르 조고래서네 소소 셈지부 조고르와다 다 셈디 안주 셈다 다된 안주 셈디 류단 파테네 여러와 제가 류단 셈니데 카테시 셈니 조지데 류디 하샤고 라이고르와다 메가 라이고르와 제가 셈다 류 카테서 셈지부 조고래 다 셈지부 조완자다 That did you kabla Gewa Savana, Gewa Dugore, Diva Savana, Diva Dugore, Dickerson, Nanju Gewa Saya, Diva Saying as the same meeting to Sagor. She's a penning as the controlana, same gay controlango, she's a same meeting to Diva Dugore. And you get that, Shelia, and Jamba Comia, the Ninja Compana, and some of the tango, some tango. She's a digawade, this same meeting in the shower. She's a dinner and Zanda, she do couple of same to go one, same to draw and Zanda. Diba digi jejabana sem nala diba yobana di rugu di and digi pingo besen pingo mara digi diba yoba digi carson nansol mati rugure drosa dia nansol mati gore diba digi dene mani nansol mati na diba digi debu digi minche da dunga nyonga chagorwa kangale kal tigorwa 지나 디바디기 조월 디바디 안줄에 시디 갑라 아니 개와치마 디기 용야다 동화래 타야 될 핑거버스 핑거 말에 디긴 강아야 뇌비기고를 뭐 라라 뇌비기고 제거를 당 아주 개와 가서 사샤바네 개와 디게다 안주기 다데 잠니죠 검야다 진바다 수련나 수비 수바가 전제 냠레 개와 가서 삼다 개줄 라마라 대바께바다 몰란께바다 개와 제바나 사샤바네 디 셈이든 요바다 셈디 아니 디기 뉴버디기 개와디기 뉴버디기 개와치마라 가와로서는 야 아니 된절에 파게 하다 미고 관을 파 게다 제나다 개와서에 제보디 하다 미고 관을 게디 된텔이야 아니 최위 등기네 갈람 강한 마체바다 아니 지기 유지 푸는 소바 요야라 소바 제사 되네 인상 아니 지기 아주 밀라야 아니 지기 강아디 세디 아주 등기토네 강한 망부시고라 디 강아세야야 아니 핑거로 최저 핑거를 안체 될때 몸베 띠 하다미 가와게는 될라야 야지 셈바 상보치야 안수 지금 잠니제다 숨 셈바 상보치 냠는지 지리비오바나 디짐라 라리야 핑거로 제자이네 되네 예자다 지난 최세디 개외 자와디서 최세디 개와세 제자 되네 예자다 시리가블 셈지부 두고래 셈 조드가블 셈단염도 나로 셈 나로 개와다 디버 두고래 지선 디버디기 안솔 뉴고르마다 패지도 와서 제자 다 팽에 집어도 가르스는 개와집으래 제자 최파시리에서 제가 시위 최마도 현강이게 판단해봐. 그래서 시위가 소 계획의 최계획을 최대위나 아주 마시냐가 주의 최대위나 최대계획을 니기 인기와치마 원dio 고발 파티 원dio 고발 된데래야 소소 류심 니기 요야게 원두신에 두고를 핑거래. 제가 최대기 핑거마도 최마도 제 강계야 핑거도 왔습니다. 두신에 셈 타줘봐니 두신에 용어를 했지. 하고 두고 그래 제발 있는 두신 또고 셈게 또 두고 그래서 또 고고 그래서
Yeah, we've been guided to recognize that what we value most in this life will all get left behind. Even this body that has accompanied us from the moment we entered this human realm until this now final moment when we are about to depart. Our mind separates from our body and continues on towards the next rebirth. That body, now separate from our mind, becomes nothing but a corpse. So this is the situation that we have found ourselves in so many times before and will again. And when we move to our next rebirth, whilst it's just our mind that goes, it is accompanied by, imprinted upon it, our various karmic imprints, both virtuous and non-virtuous. So this is because examples of virtuous imprints will be minds of love, of compassion, of generosity, of ethics. So being these the mental component of this karma, this is imprinted on the mind. So too with non-virtues such as anger. So anger is a mind of anger. It may be expressed physically or verbally, but it is a mind. Hence, there are imprints upon the mind, and it's that accompanies one, and that alone that accompanies one. So here, one needs to reflect very clearly that it's only my imprints that will accompany me. Actually, what is of value in this life is the accumulation and purification of imprints. It is that that's important. So all my endeavors to build relationships with others, my valued friends and loved ones, they will be left behind. But the virtue and non-virtue I accumulated for their sake, that will accompany me, and that alone. Likewise, all my wealth and possessions that I strove to accumulate, they will all be left behind. But the imprints I accrued whilst accumulating my wealth, that will accompany me. So this we need to reflect on well, because when our death comes, our imprints are what determine our next rebirth and all our experiences in that rebirth. If it is a non-virtuous imprint that propels our next rebirth, we can only but take rebirth in the lower realms. And whenever non-virtuous imprints ripen, their result is only ever suffering, whether it's in the lower realms or the higher realms. And so too, if it's a virtuous imprint that ripens at the time of death, propelling our next rebirth, that too can only lead to rebirth in the high realms. And when virtuous imprints ripen, either in the high realms or the lower realms, they only lead to experiences of happiness. For example, if we have developed every time we acted upon a generous, a mind of generosity, a wish to give of ourselves, or maybe didn't even act upon it, but gave rise to such a mind, we accumulated an imprint. That will help ensure that we have material abundance in lives to come, as well as that and other imprints will ensure we have favorable circumstances for our ongoing spiritual developments and so forth. So here the key recognition is that all that accompanies us when we die is these imprints on our mind. Therefore, what is of greatest importance in this life is not our body, not our possessions, not even our relationships, but the imprints that we accumulate and those others that we purify.
Dine zada nga zuge shidi kabla da nga zuge phongbo lenji ji phongbo yang dor ne xiangwo da xian da ji me se ji za xian ba de ge xia zhen zhou ba de lenji ji bi xie ru ju dor na ane xian da ji me xian ba de ge de gu jia la de nian xin ni du de gang xie ba de yin jie yin ruo de xian zhou yin de yin su le ji na de xie ru ju phongbo de xian zhou gu duo su le ne xian da ji me se de xian ba de ge gang ge de ge su le.
So this first sub-outline that's buried in this first paragraph ends with what need to talk of anything else. So in other words, if this body that has accompanied us from the first moment of this life, so from the moment of conception to the final moment, if even that is left behind, then no need to talk about anything else. Of course, everything else gets left behind.
Zanda du sinanga jugi shiru kalanga namshi phungpo da jeje namshi duen ruo wa da da na zu phungpo de lai go wa da phungpo de la de da phungpo de da gares ne xing da ji wa cha de wa da xing da ko ka san de ga ya ma da de ne gi xing da ji wa de de ne meta da je me phungpo meta da thala ro cha ro wa di phungpo meta de we thala di na nga jugi xing meta de thala yin de ji ba ji ya ro cha ma de kya ga ya ma wa ni de thala yin ba la ni be chi shung ga ya ma ba si de ne za du sum da we na de ne gi nga ji shi chan ne ne shi wi gi phung bo su bo da thala ya za chi mo ji yo se ga ge shi mi za chi mo da de ne cha ga cha go ma ba da ji da go ni de ga ya yo ma ba da xin ge da xin do da ji ba cha go xin ge xin me da de be thala da ji ba ma de xian ga ya ma ba.
One then imagines that period with your consciousness leaving behind now the corpse, that cherished body that is now nothing more than a corpse. This physical aggregate that has been left behind, in reality, as we imagine it being carried away and placed on a pile of wood, there's not much difference between this corpse and the wood beneath it. When the wood is set alight and it and the body is burning, there's not much difference between them. Both are equally devoid of life. Both are equally unable to be supportive of life. Both are now engulfed in flame. And when the flames pass, all that is left is ashes. The wood and the body both being reduced to ash. So in this way we come to recognize that a body devoid of consciousness is of no more value than a piece of wood.
Andine zadanga sosuge namshedan je sawara kayo talara mado andelia taladile jik da namshini din yomdu yobene aji taladile dushene namshile pembaru shungura dines kayo maro de mero da dinegi mesu da yan samnana kayo wasu da anjugi yan lamada dinegi range lami kudinde kudike je shen da dikaso talada dines suche denlia anjige zaachimbo je nyaje jigidu wasu karrela de da ya ndiya susuge nyamling je tange thone khabar chyo bare susuge asne lami dinegi kudike talade bene guru shen denima anjig jik deba chopu de dele dene lamage range lamege the lang la jinche bodan ge jinche bo yinba lama de za chen bo yinba di thala di go za chen bo sum go ma dele dene an lama de range la o da di phagi digi tenso ta so so le tenso ta lama de la za chen bo re jinche bo re sem be ga lama le deba ge ya rang le jinche bo yinba yima lama lu ku shep ge ya dene ge sam ta je dene lama le an che bu phu ya je be so so lo so sa ti pya ji go ro je za lama le deba ge ya Lama le dimo gubakia, Lama de wiki betoneda, Lama lea, so deep deada, Lama le chevuya jayadu, that's also a gay gazure, gawa bottom of a satu war. Dine zada, me anzugi, Lamigi, good shen, good deniga pasha, delia, and Chisha Zachimuzi, that don't have chimboyva to a yedivachua. And the Mijuma de get denegate, don't have skyomara to skyomara. Dene jesu taje jijine corona ya nya pe digi tinga le pe du ja jere nya ma kanga ra ma bo tere se be ne ki divosa ya nya yong su ra.
So with this reflection we come to see that a body which even before it's burnt, you could say it's a collection of ash, or a collection maybe of particles, we'd rather say. When it's devoid of consciousness, really it has no value. But when it's conjoined with consciousness, then it has life, then it is of value. But as soon as consciousness separates from the body, it's no different from the cremation wood that it is to be placed upon. So, where it is quite different though, is with beings who over a course of lifetimes have radically transformed their mind. When their consciousness then leaves their body, their students will relate to their body, even though it's devoid of consciousness, in a manner that this body that is devoid of consciousness still is a basis upon which extensive virtue can be accumulated. So this is not the case with ordinary beings. For ordinary beings, the only result from a corpse of an ordinary being is some may give rise to unhappiness, remembering their loved one who passed. Others may see the corpse of their hated enemy and just be glad that they're dead. So that's the case for us ordinary beings. But for those who have transformed their mind and lived a life of great significance, when their consciousness moves on, in relation to this now body devoid of consciousness, students will still give rise to faith and thereby generate virtue, and they will make heartfelt promises before the body, which is devoid of consciousness, but before the body of their dear teacher, making promises such as a commitment to live in a way that fulfills their teacher's heart wishes. So this is a remarkable and unique outcome for those who have radically transformed their mind and had a impact on others that has extraordinary value.
최마도 판도 최마도 매반다 최딘지 미징에 봐 지고도 선배다 타줘봐대 차고로 지상 최지고 봐 타줘봐서 소라 대나 세디 분조 탐지기 다양 돌라 다게 장 디다 돌네 지딘 현도 조와시 내버롱 세대다 지상 세디 분조 탐지기 지 아주 시디 안파 대주기 장 아주님도 용 말에 돌그래서 야샤그래서 $.那所以呢讲就是下主要的嘛都切主要没办法的就像多呢几天दिन嘛前节的绿的呢把多少钱让那么些的对钱呢给我起码是如果我的没办法就是去用过的也是用多少是没办法用是他希望没办法他去把什么希望没办法他去把这下过的
Now we move to the second outline within this paragraph, which is the decision that one comes to. So each of these three routes has three reasons, and those three reasons are followed by a decision. So here we now come to the decision that one comes to, having reflected on this particular route. Now you should contemplate. There will certainly come a time when all the wonderful things of this life leave me, just as I leave them, and I will proceed to another life. So this reflection, so we don't have it in the English. It was not really necessary, but the very first word in the quotation would be then. So this again, it shows a link that now having contemplated on these 3 points, that our loved ones, our possessions, and our body will all be left behind and will not be of any use to us. But all that will accompany us when we die are our imprints, virtuous and non-virtuous. So having contemplated on that, we now come to the decision. So that first word in the quotation would be then. So what the part that Geshe read out most of it, in this part, relates to the contemplation that my death is certain. So the first of the three routes. There will certainly come a time when all the wonderful things of this life leave me, just as I leave them, and I will proceed to another life. So that part refers to the first of the three routes, that my death is certain.
대양 sen 디리옹 냠도 삼라스. 제자다 시와데 냐바 시와레다 시야데 다 디링 다 시루다 선비게 냐바도 등 남친 에메사지 책으로 하다 남친 에메 인자다 디링 시와도 용그레다 선비게 되게 삼당을 했어요.
The second of the three routes then is referenced in the next part of the quote. Not the quote, sorry, but of the reflection. This may even happen today. So this is having recognized again that my death is inevitable, but the time of my death could be at any moment. There is no certainty when my death will come.
제가 대소 대시 김전되기도 삼단데 치워랑 해바래 다 남친 해바 치워된 게 디용 해바 땐때매 선배게 대선 치워랑 해바 삼단에 되네 가지고 왔으네 제사다 해바 매바자 시위갑을 대시 강을 셰바 디게래 년다 류다 롱주 소健康에 장 미당 와라 아네 초셰버라 취자고 봐 타주바 망도 자고 제사 되네 인자나 체디점기 년다 류 소수기 인니도다 소수의 코어다 롱주에다 류라 비 차비게 지원도 당제 아니 지 디점기 된다 양은 저게 야가 제주도 스마제 바제 대소 안바 디원도 마땅 바제 다디 최지 마신데도 탑미도 당의 최지님은 지 선배다 타주고 그래서 그러다 셈이야 타주 가지고 타주고 그래서 최자와 타주와 망도 자고 제가 지금은 진습에 되는 삼로도 야내야 땅 오르세요 마도자 된다 계속에다 대시셰바는 시두갑라 다니니도게 파야미도 규자라 팬데미도 랑 류리아 팽기비도 다 최시위에 가려 팽이 최드마도 민도와서 매바자 당에 최드마진의 탑민도 최드 지긴 선배다 디린 방에 최냠는 야고 시긴 선배 삼로디 타죄제 다 디린의 타죄제 도시네 야네 야도 삼당고 타죄바디 삼로디 야네 야도 당고 그래서 그러다
Here, in what Lama Tsongkhapa is guiding us to reflect on, another way that this is expressed is Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, at all times, remind yourself, my death is coming. It is certain. This is not something merely theoretical, and it is also not something necessarily at some far distant time. It can happen at any time. So remind oneself of those two roots. And then the third, so what has value is not these things that have actually consumed so much of my time and energy and have really deceived me, because I've now recognized when death comes, they will be of no help, but will be left behind. So therefore, and now the next sentence, repeatedly make the decision to practice the Dharma and avoid falling under the influence of your body, your friend, your possessions, and so forth. So this then is something that one can take to mind to learn that and reflect on, call to mind again and again whilst one's going through one's day, reminding oneself about what really matters and what does not, and ensure that one's mind is therefore being taken care of, because that is what matters.
dāndā dēnī kī tāchū dī yāngi māngdū jāwō sī, yāngi yāngdū, yāngi dēnī samdānggō lā rōwa, sōng rōwa. Chīsā dā ngā rā dzū lē chū xie wā sāmbē samlō yōnggū rā kāpī lē, yīnē ādā jīgī, jī xie wā sāmbē samlō yōnggā yāngi lēgā jī tōngā jīnā lēgā dī pā xio jī, chū dī pā xia jī. Yāngi jīgī jīg tū wō dā, nī tū wō jē wō sāmbē, dā dēnī xī yōnggū rōwa dā. Chīsā dēnī yīnsā, dī gā rā tsā ngā rā dzū kī lē, chū dī chā wō dō sāmbē, tāchū zāng bā dēmbū xiu jī mē bā dā ngā dzū lē, bē jī that machine 탑민도 생비게다 되니게 타주기 셈데 타주의 최저고 선배 삼로 연나야 이 타주의 뉴버디 매량 아들이야 진짜리 뉴버디 제자다 최저고 타주에다 드린 지대가 가리나 되네 파 최디 또 지긴 선배 삼단 야내야도 삼단만은 되니게 삼로디 뉴벌 마선에 철셔 신제 뉴버 숙체모 가져요 번에 다 간제 나중에 니 제력이 되니게 듬바디 가지 숙체나 레가들이 교화지야다 안에 지게 게디 잔다디게 파샤제 레가들 조지야디 최고로 와 되네자다 완전제레 야네 양도 타셔 삼당고래서야디 나중에 최제력이 다 최지마진 탑민도 제고도 선배 삼로디다 바 뉴버 차당고 그래서 그러다
So the very first word in the sentence, you hear me say so often, this word repeatedly. This is an indispensable part of training the mind. It's an indispensable part to bring about the development of new habits and break old habits. It is indispensable. I know all of you do reflect on the Dharma, and I know that because you are here. And if you are here, you are thinking about the Dharma. So we do this together in our classes. This is our group meditation together in these teachings. And I know that most of you, if not all of you, you meditate most mornings, if not every morning. But the question then you each need to ask yourself is, outside of my formal practice, times gathered together in here, and time on my meditation seat. Outside of that, where is my mind? And I imagine the vast majority of your time is likely to be on the various activities in your life. Those relating to your career, those relating to entertainment, those relating to relationships, and those relating perhaps to events in the world. That is where your mind mostly is. And the result is the Dharma remains on the cushion, doesn't yet arise in your mind. So this is the missing link. To become a genuine Dharma practitioner, in the quiet times, For example, when we gather together here or on your meditation seat, there with less distraction, keep your mind on the Dharma. But when you are out of those formal situations, this needs to be your primary, what you are primarily thinking about. Because what it comes down to is taking care of your mind, ensuring your mind stays virtuous, being mindful of your mind no matter what you are doing, keeping your mind away from the afflictions. This is how you take the Dharma from formal settings, from books, from teachings, from meditation session, into your daily life. That's how it's done. And that's how you develop the Dharma within you, so it becomes part of who you are and influencing your daily life. This is how you get the Dharma to arise within you in a way that's powerful and stable and transformative.
ane gedi shigirela ne da gedi shi tende yomarse diya suina ha gudu gura tanga ha gura gedi shi ya tende yomarse sesangan zo shigire sembe samlo chiore de teni shigire sembe samlo de ngeba timbu pechi choma mai baru ji ngazu le le yomare te kabrele samlo tana mi kisya da samlo shigire sembe samlo chiore ma do ne denigi shigire sembe samlo de choma mai ba ngeba tinne ngeba de ngazu le mebare desan di meba za shiwage chiwege 김제 마보 삼단 도시번에 시에게 삼마디 녀바티니 녀바지 게야 되네 아직 기디시기를라네 따텐데 엄마다 세베기 되네 니 남지 녀메 삼마디야 예도 요르데 이나데 녀바템부티네 녀바지 메바랑아지 제가 디 자다께 치위게 모두 수야네 야도 삼도데 녀바티네 녀바지 라디나신 아니 시두데 갑로경 분자다니네 티에르베스네 딘 티에르메스 하고 그래 유절라 케도야르스 요 말씀 신의 결혼 수부디 케도야르 디야 요 말 레그로 와다 먼저 하고 그래 이네 디케르 메바디 셈 딩닝 에바디 메레다 메바자 두치네 삼단에 두치네 안에 양도 삼단에 셈 딩이야 땅 에바니에바리도 나중에 셈리아 소미다스 리기서로 와다 용고로 와다 디네 삼단람사디 소미다스 오다디 실은 제가 캐면다 다시 야르가리었으면 최지마도 주편 시나 시위깔이야 판도이긴 제와 침몰로 판도르긴 최 냠는 지부마도 민도와 선배게다 두치는 삼로도 하고 하고요도 네바니에리도 다디 최디 맞이나 탑 민도들은 지긴 선배 삼로디다 네바 두치는 삼다디다 두치는 삼로 숙침모 땅에 안에 다디 되는 네바 타주버 로쩌마 많이 바시게 오래서 오래다디 대수 두스킨 잡아있는 두스킨 기용 그래서
So if we take these three routes, and I were to ask any of you, whether here or you, if you're watching at home, or if I was to ask any people in your life, all of you would say the same. Yes, I will die, and I have no doubt. There's very little dispute about this in society. And if I was to ask you or anyone that you know, and is the time of your death, is it certain, is it definite? And again, everyone would say, don't know when it will come. So here, this is recognized. But this is something that is merely known, understood. It's not something that has been seen or been realized. It's not yet uncontrived or spontaneous within you. In other words, this topic is still intellectual. It hasn't yet been realized. It hasn't led to inner transformation. When the topic arises within one in an uncontrived manner, in other words, you don't have to sit down and contrive it, for example, by reading or by thinking about it, calling it to mind or reflecting on it, but it spontaneously arises within you. This is when inner transformation has come and the topic has been realized in an uncontrived manner. And likewise with the third route, if I was to ask any of you, again here or whether watching at home or anyone that you know, when death comes, will you have to leave behind all your loved ones, all your wealth and possessions, and even your body? Everyone will agree. But this too is not yet realized. This knowledge is merely intellectually known. One may have heard this many times. One may agree wholeheartedly with what you need to look at. It's how you live your life. Because the mistake that we make is that we exaggerate the value we place on our relationships, on our wealth and possessions, and on our body. It's not that these don't have value, they certainly have value, but we exaggerate the value. This exaggeration is the afflictions playing their role of deceiving us. And in this way, our mind doesn't yet change. In this way, we have yet to realize this topic. So the goal is to come to see this topic for oneself, to realize it with vivid clarity. This is the meaning of it being uncontrived or spontaneous.
That means that dental joy you gewadi, Chizangason do you migawadi, Chizada gewadi, Pando, Gewamato, Pando, Shiuka, Pando, Gewachima, Yapuya, Pando, and the Gewadma, Chebaji, Resha, and some died the Hawaii did that, Nanzuki Che, Yamlenje, Che, Lobje, Hanzu, Aku, the names that Dushin, that Jeremy, Lamrim Nadusi, Sumai, Sona doing Anzu Dushin, Jebachi, Hawaii, that is a she would say, Chazan Dorje, Dorje, and God was a Susan Namshidi, Meva Chagimare, Namshidi, and that she was in Namshidi, Meva Chana, didn't she was by Marogan, Subo the Chazan Meva Chadu, Namshi Meva Chana, Gewachima draws Merwa, didn't get some Pentos Guy Merwa. She said that Meva Chago, Namshidi Meva do or a zero. Draw that draw now, God to resident. Yana dendrily do or Yana Andrew draws a Nima de Yomades. The general droid. As the machine like Yawaga to Tubna and Digi Kinchin to Wars. Nandul droid machine like up to a Diva Karchevan and Digi Kinchin to Wars. Says I don't Dini that Nandul Dona Gayores. Kiwio Mares. Dendrul Dona, Nansol to the Besh, like you are your Kangachua, your resident. Says I'm to Kangachua, the droid gives the drag to your Dini is that Gavanyam Jawore said, Dushin Sungor.
So whilst these three roots and their reasons are something that is widely accepted and not really under much dispute, the three decisions that one comes to, and each of the roots is followed by a decision, these are really only decisions that those who have an education in the Dharma will come to. And the decisions from the first root is the need to practice the Dharma. The decision from the second root is the need to practice the Dharma right now. And the decision that follows from this root is the recognition that only the Dharma is to be practiced. In other words, only the Dharma has value. And to recognize that, one has to have an education in the Dharma. Because it's through one's education in the Dharma, one comes to recognize that when death comes, consciousness does not cease, the mind does not cease. If the mind ceased, well then the presentation of the Dharma wouldn't be as important. But the mind continues. The body ceases, the body is left behind, but the mind continues. And the mind, whilst it continues alone in the sense of it's not accompanied by your loved ones or by your possessions or by the body, it is not entirely alone. It is, in fact, it's controlled by the karmic imprints that accompany it. Our mind is not liberated. It is not free, but it's under the control of those karmic imprints that surround it. And they determine where our next rebirth is. They determine whether we remain in the higher realms or we fall to the lower realms. And they determine what kind of rebirth we will take, whether it will be a rebirth with abundance or a rebirth with impoverishment, a rebirth with good health or a rebirth with pain and misery. Recognizing this, it becomes very clear, this final decision, that only the Dharma matters. Only practicing the Dharma matters. Or to express this slightly differently, only taking care of my mind in all circumstances, ensuring it remains unafflicted and therefore rather virtuous. This is all that matters. Everything else, as it will eventually be left behind, does not matter. And to motivate one in this, we need to reflect on future rebirths. Because we all want to be happy. None of us wants to suffer and be in pain. And our future rebirth is therefore pivotal.
düğünle çapıge çane an zo somla çedizamge çedigi jawala bezo zo chen joma jege de ba joma ma yinbaji ju yete shu chen bo je 당한 저 최 냠len 최 고마 시행들 다 개와 치매기 고 삼화 단거 말와 당한 저게 다 인간 최 제행 최 냠len 개와 치마 켈len 최 제행 고 셰베나 당한 저 개와 치마기 된다라 개와 치마기 된 개와 치마 원dio 고마 토야다 원디에 땡데라 디규두에게 삼노 충충시 받아요 말하지라 가브리다 요랑아다 진짜 최지 개와 치마도 지고선 다 충주 조던 안 저기 삼나라의 시디즘기 자와딜이야 배셈 제게 등여기 숙심보를 지외 봐세 나 개와 치매기 원dio 고마 토야 땡데라 디규두에 삼노도 요르요르데 안 저기 충충시 받아 매발해 그래서 다두신의 삼다 개와 치마다 개와 치마 셀베 다른 부를 제가 디네 인자라 치마 조에 메로와다 상예 탈바다 상예 고방마도 바로 치마 조에 메바래 제가 디네 인자 다 치매 돈이게 다데 삼로디 파 유었다 진행한 소리야 개와 치매 돈이 개와 치마 원디오 고방도 땡델에 있나야 안지 류리야 류심 되게 요야다 튕게 요 되게 요야 디 땡델이야 하는 거 소리 ዣ래 펜바 잠니제 자주심라 소바 차사 냠는 제 투얘기 땡해바젠데 토부도 선비게 삼로디 다 디슈처 다제 디조 냠는 제다 체디자 체디게 자와디 다 슈셜파 데네게 냠는 제래 튕게 야 책임을야다 체디래 칼라다 둘로다 차상 고고여바자 데네자다 류린 초고엔자 조 삼로데 개와 치매기 원디오 고방 토 땡델이야 땡 원디오 고방 톱지 땡델에 잠니제다 자주심라서 봐 냠는 제투비 땡해바친 토부도 선배서 디톱력에 삼로도 조시 디톱에게 된다라 게셔디 배수에 조지야지 다 체디점기 당은 저기 레가디 다 쇼얼파 충충으로서 두스네 삼당고야디 다디가 저기 냠직 디 개와 치마 돈이게 삼다야데 랍시 조어디 냠네 제와디 디레다 디게게 된다라 저기 치와메다바 남쟁에 메레 치베서 최마다 강에 그냥 풍이 말해서디 송고에 김세로지 디삼로디 게게 된다라 송고르다 다된 안 저기라 삼로디 체디점기 자와를 진피게 자와시야데 르디 숙체 체치미게 된게 삼로디 충충마도 메바레 디자다 바 유었다 전에 디네 삼네 개와 치미기 땡기 원디오 고방 토야기 돈이기 삼로디 숙체와 조어지제 체디점기 지게 레갈야 되네게 되냐기디 바 쇼얼파 충충으로지 쇼얼파 제야디 도시오고 해서 소거를 삼디게 얘기도 송거와
For almost everyone in this world, their mind is permanently dominated by this life's events. Or to express this slightly differently, to attain and enjoy this life's pleasures and to avert this life's problems. This is what dominates almost everyone. And for those who are not religious, their thoughts really are just about this life. And for those who are religious, just now and again, there'll be talk about their future lives. But the thoughts their minds will be dominated by thoughts of this life. But for those of us who are religious, we need to lift our focus from this one life to the many lives that lie before us. And as I've been presenting here, by lifting our focus means we need to develop this to a point where it's uncontrived, where that we are genuinely focused on lives beyond this one. Because the position we are in right now is these topics generally, for us, they touch us when we think about them, but mostly we do not think about them. So it's only when they are contrived, when we intentionally think about them, that the Dharma topics touch us. But we need to make them very much a part of who we are, in that they are always present, manifest within. That way they would be uncontrived. In that way, they will have an ongoing impact on us. So what we need to do is overcome this view, which sees our future lives as some far-off event, but to recognize the reality that our future life could be very soon. It may well be, for one of us, something that we experience tonight. For another, it may be next week. We do not know. The reality is, this could happen. And moreover, we need to recognize that our next rebirth, too, is not our final one. There is rebirth after rebirth after rebirth, countless number of lives before us, until finally liberation is gained. So when we look forward like that, at this expanse of lives before us, how can we say that this remaining period of this life, whatever it may be, even if it is decades, is of such importance? How can we say that the attainment of this pleasure, the avoidance of that problem, has much importance? When we think of the stream of lives that certainly lie before all of us until liberation is finally gained. So this is how we need to come to think, so that we can genuinely let go of striving for this life's pleasures and being delighted when we achieve them, and striving to overcome this life's problems and being distressed when things don't go as we'd want them to. And to do so, we need to develop a genuine focus on lives beyond this. When this, and the measure of this Dharma topic, like the others, being cultivated, is when it's uncontrived. So it will influence our daily life. So how this topic can be noticed as being developed to the point of being uncontrived is that it has an impact on us, not just that we have an effective meditation, but as we go through our day, the way that we interact with others is changed. The way we interact with our work colleagues, with our family, with strangers is changed. Where we put our time and our energy, where our thoughts are, this all changes. And in particular, we remain aware of our mental process, no matter whom we are with or what we are doing, ensuring our mind stays virtuous and not afflicted. So this is the goal that we need to come to, the level of attainment we need to come to with this and every topic. Then thank you. Impermanence has come to our time together tonight. Thank you.